Chitterelli drew his chair closer to the bed and continued in a low voice. I forgot to ask you first what sort of acquittal you want. There are three possibilities. That is definite acquittal, ostensible acquittal, and indefinite postponement. Definite acquittal is, of course, the best, but I haven't the slightest influence on that kind of verdict. As far as I know, there is no single person who could influence the verdict of definite acquittal. The only deciding factor seems to be the innocence of the accused. Since you're innocent, of course, it would be possible for you to ground your case on your innocence alone. But then you would require neither my help nor help from anyone. This lucid explanation took Kay aback at first, but he replied in the same subdued voice as the painter. It seems to me that you're contradicting yourself. In what way? Asked the painter patiently, leaning back with a smile. The smile awoke in Kay a suspicion that he was now about to expose contradictions not so much in the painter's statements as in the court procedure itself. However, he did not retreat but went on. You made the assertion earlier that the court is impervious to proof. Later, you qualified that assertion by confining it to the public sessions of the court, and now you actually say that an innocent man requires no help before the court. That alone implies a contradiction. But in addition, you said at first that the judges can be moved by personal intervention, and now you deny that definite acquittal, as you call it, can ever be achieved by personal intervention. In that lies the second contradiction. These contradictions are easy to explain, said the painter. We must distinguish between two things, what is written in the law and what I have discovered through personal experience. You must not confuse the two. In the code of the law, which admittedly I have not read, it is of course laid down on the one hand that the innocent shall be acquitted. But it is not stated on the other hand that the judges are open to influence. Now, my experience is diametrically opposed to that. I have not met one case of definite acquittal, and I have met many cases of influential intervention. It is possible, of course, that in all the cases known to me, there was none in which the accused was really innocent. But it's not that improbable. Among so many cases, no single case of innocence. Even as a child, I used to listen carefully to my father when he spoke of cases he had heard about. The judges, too, who came to his studio were always telling stories about the court. In our circle, it is, in fact, the sole topic of discussion. No sooner did I get the chance to attend the court myself than I took full advantage of it. I have listened to countless cases in their most crucial stages and followed them as far as they could be followed. And yet, I must admit it, I've never encountered one case of definite acquittal. Not one case of acquittal, then, said Kay, as if he were speaking to himself and his hopes. But that merely confirms the opinion that I have already formed of this court. It is a pointless institution from any point of view. A single executioner could do all that is needed. You mustn't generalize, said the painter in displeasure. I have only quoted my own experience. That's quite enough, said Kay. Or have you heard of acquittals in earlier times? Such acquittals, replied the painter, are said to have occurred. Only it is very difficult to prove the fact. The final decisions of the court are never recorded. Even the judges can't get hold of them. Consequently, we have only legendary accounts of ancient cases. These legends certainly provide instances of acquittal. Actually, the majority of them are about acquittals. They can be believed, but they cannot be proved. All the same, they shouldn't be entirely left out of account. They must have an element of truth in them. And besides, they are very beautiful. I myself have painted several pictures founded on such legends. Mere legends cannot alter my opinion, said Kay, and I fancy that one cannot appeal to such legends before the court. The painter laughed. No, one can't do that, he said. Then there's no use talking about them, said Kay, willing for the time being to accept the painter's opinions, even where they seemed improbable or contradicted other reports he had heard. He had no time now to inquire into the truth of all the painter said, much less contradict it. The utmost he could hope to do was to get the man to help him in some way, even should the help prove inconclusive. Accordingly, he said, let us leave definite acquittal out of account then. You mentioned two other possibilities as well. Ostensible acquittal and postponement. These are the only possibilities, said the painter. But won't you take off your jacket before we go on to speak of them? You look very hot. Yes, said Kay, who had been paying no attention to anything but the painter's expositions. But now that he was reminded of the heat, found his forehead drenched in sweat. It's almost unbearable, the painter nodded as if he comprehended Kay's discomfort quite well. Couldn't we open the window? Asked Kay. No, replied the painter. It's only a sheet of glass let into the roof. It can't be opened. Now Kay realized that he had been hoping all the time that either the painter or he himself would suddenly go over to the window and fling it open. He was prepared to gulp down even mouthfuls of fog if he could only get air. The feeling of being completely cut off from the fresh air made his head swim. He brought the flat of his hand down on the feather bed and said in a feeble voice, "That's both uncomfortable and unhealthy." "Oh no," said the painter in defense of his window. "Because it's hermetically sealed, it keeps the warmth in much better than a double window, though it's only a simple pane of glass. And if I want to air the place, which isn't really necessary, for the air comes in everywhere through the chinks, I can always open one of the doors or even both of them." Somewhat reassured by this explanation, Kay glanced around to discover the second door. The painter saw what he was doing and said, "It's behind you. I had to block it up by putting the bed in front of it." Only now did Kay see the little door in the wall. "This is really too small for a studio," said the painter, as if to forestall Kay's criticisms. "I had to manage as best I could. Of course, it's a bad place for a bed just in front of that door." The judge whom I'm painting just now, for instance, always comes in by that door, and I've had to give him a key for it so that he can wait for me in the studio if I happen to be out. Well, he usually arrives early in the morning, while I'm still asleep. And of course, however fast asleep I am, it wakes me with a start when the door behind my bed suddenly opens. You would lose any respect you have for the judges if you could hear the curses that welcome him when he climbs over my bed in the early morning. I can certainly take the key away from him again, but that would only make things worse. It is easy enough to burst open any of the doors here. All during these exchanges, Kay kept considering whether he should take off his jacket, but at last he realized that if he did not, he would be incapable of staying any longer in the room, so he took it off, laying it, however, across his knee to save time and putting it on again whenever the interview was finished. Scarcely had he taken off his jacket when one of the girls cried, "He's taken off his jacket now," and he could hear them all crowding to peer through the cracks and view the spectacle for themselves. "The girls think," said the painter, "that I'm going to paint your portrait, and that's why you are taking off your jacket." "I see," said Kay, very little amused, for he did not feel much better than before, although he was now sitting in his shirt sleeves. Almost morosely he asked, "What did you say the other two possibilities were?" He had already forgotten what they were called. "Ostensible acquittal and indefinite postponement," said the painter. "It lies with you to choose between them. I can help you to either of them, though not without taking some trouble, and as far as that is concerned, the difference between them is that ostensible acquittal demands temporary concentration, while postponement taxes your strength less but means a steady strain." "First, then, let us take ostensible acquittal. If you decide on that, I shall write down on a sheet of paper an affidavit of your innocence. The text for such an affidavit has to be handed down to me by my father and is unassailable. The text for such an affidavit has been handed down to me by my father and it is unassailable. Then with this affidavit I shall make a round of the judges I know, beginning, let us say, with the judge I am painting now. When he comes for his sitting tonight, I shall lay the affidavit before him, explain to him that you are innocent, and guarantee your innocence myself. And that is not merely a formal guarantee, but a real and binding one." In the eyes of the painter there was a faint suggestion of reproach that Kay should lay upon him the burden of such a responsibility. "That would be very kind of you," said Kay, "and the judge would believe you and yet not give me a definite acquittal?" "As I have already explained," replied the painter, "besides, it is not in the least certain that every judge will believe me. Some judges, for instance, will ask to see you in person, and then I should have to take you with me to call on them. Though when that happens, the battle is already half won, particularly as I should tell you beforehand, of course, exactly what line to take with each judge. The real difficulty comes with the judges who turn me away at the start, and that's sure to happen too. I shall go on petitioning them, of course, but we shall have to do without them, though one can afford to do that, since dissent by individual judges cannot affect the result. Well then, if I get a sufficient number of judges to subscribe to the affidavit, I shall then deliver it to the judge who is actually conducting your trial. Possibly I may have secured his signature too. Then everything will be settled fairly soon, a little sooner than usual. Generally speaking, there should be no difficulties worth mentioning after that. The accused at this stage feels supremely confident. Indeed, it's remarkable, but true, that people's confidence mounts higher at this stage than after their acquittal. There's no need for them to do much more. The judge is covered by the guarantees of the other judges subscribing to the affidavit, and so he can grant an acquittal with an easy mind. And though some formalities will remain to be settled, he will undoubtedly grant the acquittal to please me and his other friends. Then you can walk out of the court a free man. So then I'm free, said Kay doubtfully. Yes, said the painter, but only ostensibly free, or more exactly, provisionally free. For the judges of the lowest grade, to whom my acquaintances belong, haven't the power to grant a final acquittal. That power is reserved for the highest court of all, which is quite inaccessible to you, to me, and to all of us. What the prospects are up there we do not know, and I may say in passing do not even want to know. The great privilege, then, of absolving from guilt our judges do not possess. But they do have the right to take the burden of the charge off your shoulders. That is to say, when you are acquitted in this fashion, the charge is lifted from your shoulders for the time being, but it continues to hover above you and can, as soon as an order comes from on high, be laid upon you again. As my connection with the court is such a close one, I can also tell you how in the regulations of the law court offices the distinction between definite and ostensible acquittal is made manifest. In definite acquittal, the documents relating to the case are said to be completely annulled. They simply vanish from sight. Not only the charge, but also the records of the case and even the acquittal are destroyed. Everything is destroyed. That's not the case with ostensible acquittal. The documents remain as they were, except the affidavit is added to them and a record of the acquittal and the grounds for granting it. The whole dossier continues to circulate as the regular official routine demands, passing on to the higher courts, being referred to the lower ones again, and thus swinging backwards and forwards with greater or smaller oscillations, longer or shorter delays. These peregrinations are incalculable. A detached observer might sometimes fancy that the whole case has been forgotten, the documents lost, and the acquittal made absolute. No one really acquainted with the court could think such a thing. No document is ever lost. The court never forgets anything. One day, quite unexpectedly, some judge will take up the documents and look at them attentively, recognize that in this case the charge is still valid, and order an immediate arrest. I have been speaking on the assumption that a long time elapses between the ostensible acquittal and the new arrest. That is possible, and I have known of such cases. But it is just as possible for the acquitted man to go straight home from the court and find officers already waiting to arrest him again. Then, of course, all his freedom is at an end. And the case begins all over again? Asked Kay almost incredulously. Certainly, said the painter. The case begins all over again. But again, it is possible, just as before, to secure an ostensible acquittal. One must again apply all one's energies to the case and never give in. These last words were probably uttered because he noticed that Kay was looking somewhat collapsed. But, said Kay, as if he wanted to forestall any more revelations, isn't the engineering of a second acquittal more difficult than the first? On that point, said the painter, one can say nothing with certainty. You mean, I take it, that the second arrest might influence the judges against the accused? That is not so. Even while they are pronouncing the first acquittal, the judges foresee the possibility of the new arrest. Such a consideration, therefore, hardly comes into question. But it may happen, for hundreds of reasons, that the judges are in a different frame of mind about the case, even from a legal standpoint, and one's efforts to obtain a second acquittal must consequently be adapted to the changed circumstances, and in general must be every whit as energetic as those cured the first one. One's efforts to obtain a second acquittal must consequently be adapted to the changed circumstances, and in general must be every whit as energetic as those that secured the first one. But this second acquittal isn't final either, said Kay, turning away his head in repudiation. Of course not, said the painter. The second acquittal is followed by the third arrest, the third acquittal by the fourth arrest, and so on. That is implied in the very conception of ostensible acquittal. Kay said nothing. Ostensible acquittal doesn't seem to appeal to you, said the painter. Perhaps postponement would suit you better. Shall I explain to you how postponement works? Kay nodded. The painter was lolling back in his chair, his nightshirt gaped open. He had thrust one hand inside it and was lightly fingering his breast. Postponement, he said, gazing in front of him for a moment as if seeking a completely accurate explanation. Postponement consists in preventing the case from ever getting any further than its first stages. To achieve that, it is necessary for the accused and his agent, but more particularly his agent, to remain continuously in personal touch with the court. Let me point out again that this does not demand such intense concentration of one's energies as an ostensible acquittal. Yet on the other hand, it does require far greater vigilance. You daren't let the case out of your sight. You visit the judge at regular intervals as well as in emergencies and must do all that is in your power to keep him friendly. If you don't know the judge personally, then you must try to influence him through other judges whom you do know, but without giving up your efforts to secure a personal interview. If you neglect none of these things, then you can assume with fair certainty that the case will never pass beyond its first stages. Not that the proceedings are quashed, but the accused is almost as likely to escape sentence as if he were free. As against ostensible acquittal, postponement has this advantage that the future of the accused is less uncertain. He is secured from the terrors of sudden arrest and doesn't need to fear having to undergo, perhaps at a most inconvenient moment, the strain and agitation which are inevitable in the achievement of ostensible acquittal. Though postponement, too, has certain drawbacks for the accused, and these must not be minimized. In saying this, I am not thinking of the fact that the accused is never free. He isn't free either in any real sense after the ostensible acquittal. There are other drawbacks. The case can't be held up indefinitely without at least some plausible grounds being provided, so as a matter of form, a certain activity must be shown from time to time. Various measures have to be taken, the accused is questioned, evidence is collected, and so on. For the case must be kept going all the time, although only in the small circle to which it has been artificially restricted. This naturally involves the accused in occasional unpleasantness, but you must not think of it as being too unpleasant, for it's all a formality. The interrogations, for instance, are only short ones. If you have neither the time nor the inclination to go, you can excuse yourself. With some judges, you can even plan your interviews a long time ahead. All that it amounts to is a formal recognition of your status as an accused man by regular appearances before your judge. Already, while these last words were being spoken, Kay had taken his jacket across his arm and got up. "He's getting up now," came the cry at once from behind the door. "Are you going already?" asked the painter, who had also got up. "I'm sure it's the air here that is driving you away. I'm sorry about it. I had a great deal more to tell you. I've had to express myself very briefly, but I hope my statements were lucid enough." "Oh yes," said Kay, whose head was aching with the strain of forcing himself to listen. In spite of Kay's confirmation, the painter went on to sum up the matter again as if to give him a last word of comfort. "But methods have this in common, that they prevent the accused from coming up for sentence. Both methods have this in common, that they prevent the accused from coming up for sentence." "But they also prevent an actual acquittal," said Kay in a low voice, as if embarrassed by his own perspicacity. "You have grasped the kernel of the matter," said the painter quickly.